Good evening and aloha. I'm United States Representative Ed Case, proudly representing Hawaii's 1st Congressional District. The 1st Congressional District is the city of Honolulu, ranging all the way in the east from Makapu'u Point all the way through Honolulu proper up to Mililani and out to Kapolei. Contains about 720,000 of my constituents, and obviously we also have the 2nd Congressional District that represents the rest of the state. I am in my 11th year of representing Hawaii in the United States House of Representatives. I've represented the 1st Congressional District since 2019, and I previously represented the 2nd Congressional District from 2002 to 2007. Representing Hawaii in Congress and staying in touch with you is really, really critical to my job of working in Washington, D.C. on behalf of our country, especially being 5,000 miles away from you for most of the year. And so these are critical opportunities for me to check in with you. I do so in a number of different ways, but my live district-wide talk stories are one of my principal ways of staying in touch. I do this in person and by Tele-Talk Story. This is actually my 8th live district talk story this year. I did 6 in person earlier this year, then 1 Tele-Talk Story in the middle of the year. And then I had another one scheduled for the night of tsunami, which we were not able to achieve. And so this is a rescheduling of this one. And then I look forward to more live and in-person and Tele-Talk stories towards the end of this year and into next year. Tonight, the format is pretty straight. I'm going to cover issues, give you a congressional report for a while, and then I'm going to turn this over to you for your questions, as many questions as I possibly can get to in the time that we have. How to ask questions. You can ask questions off of the Facebook comment page that if you're on Facebook, you can email us at ed.case@mail.house.gov. If you are on the phone here and you have a question, you can press star and 3 on your phone and get in touch with somebody on our staff who will take your question. You can also dial in directly if you'd like to do that at 855-274-9528. You can also go to my website at case.house.gov/live, where we are also televising this live. And there's a feature there for you to be able to ask questions and send them on in. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. We have to be off by 7:30. And so the bottom line is I'll do as much as I can between now and 7:30, but after 7:30, we're fully available to you to continue to answer those questions any way we possibly can. I want to provide some of the resources of my office up front, because I think it's really important to communicate to you that everything I'm talking to you about tonight is on my webpage at case.house.gov in one way or another. My webpage, case.house.gov, is the entry point to all of the information I hope that you need about me, my office, and what I am doing, case.house.gov. We have on that page direct links to my votes, direct links to my speeches, my statements, my proposed legislation, summaries of the issues that we are dealing with here, and many, many other things that I hope would give you a full accounting of what I'm up to and answer many of those questions. So that's a major resource to communicate to you about. And I hope you will go there early and often. Obviously, I also am assisted by a great staff, both here and in my DC office. My staff is fully available to you to help you with your questions and to deal with your concerns. I always like to start with my mission, because I think it's important for you to know what I believe my mission is and how I organize my work to achieve my mission. I've got 3 parts to my mission. The first part of my mission is exactly what the Constitution says my mission is, which is to represent the 1st Congressional District of Hawaii and its 720,000 residents in the United States Congress with my vote in the great issues of our day, the future of our country, issues that have to do with foreign policy, issues that have to do with domestic policy, issues that may not have anything to do with Hawaii itself, but are important to our country. Our obligation is to be a participant in the decisions that we make in our country through your representatives and my vote. So my first and foremost part of my mission is what the Constitution says it is, which is to contribute to national leadership for our country and for our world. The second part of my mission is to make sure that our federal government is helping us here in Hawaii with our issues. We have many, many issues here in Hawaii, as do any state, any jurisdiction across the country. Some of ours are very, very unique because of being an island state, because of any number of factors. And sometimes our federal government just forgets how to handle those issues. Sometimes we have major crises that we need our federal government on, such as Red Hill, such as Maui. And my job in that part of my mission is to make sure that everything that the federal government can do is done to assist us with our issues here. The third part of my job is to help you with your individual concerns. Aside from the national issues, aside from what Hawaii needs, you need help too. You need help with things that are pretty straightforward, like you're coming to Washington, D.C. and need a little bit of advice. We can help you out with a tour of the Capitol, although not right now, which I'll get into. We can help you with some basic advice in terms of seeing your nation's capital. But more directly, we all have an interface with our government at some point or another, whether we like it or not. Veterans benefits, social security benefits, immigration issues, passports, any number of things that we have to interchange with our federal government over. And oftentimes people can just get lost in the maze of that. And my job is to help you with that. We refer to that as casework because we treat each individual constituent concern as its own case, and we go out and we try to solve it for you. And so those are the three parts of my mission. And every single day, my staff and I are moving among our obligation of national leadership, our obligation to help Hawaii with our concerns, and our obligation to help you with your concerns. I use a lot of tools to achieve my goals and to fulfill all of these missions. One incredible tool that I have at this point is just the knowledge, the experience, and the seniority that I've built up in over a decade in Congress in terms of how to get things done in Congress, especially for a small state 5,000 miles away. My major tool along those lines is the Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee is a very special committee in Congress because although each committee, there are many committees in Congress, they all have kind of a subject matter, for example, armed services, veterans affairs, education, agriculture. All of that has to be funded. And all of that funding comes from one committee, and that is the Appropriations Committee. Very fortunate now to be in my 7th year on appropriations. And so easily 6 months plus of the working year for me in Washington, D.C. is utilizing the full weight of the Appropriations Committee to walk through federal funding for the year on the national basis, but also to make sure that as we do so, Hawaii's needs are taken care of through appropriations. And we're successful in delivering billions and billions of dollars to Hawaii if we do a good job, which I think our delegation has done for quite a while now. So I'm proud to be a part of that effort. I think also relationships in DC. I've been able to build up friendships in some cases, relationships, working relationships, partnerships on specific issues, including with people that maybe I don't have a whole bunch else to do with or that I agree with them on, but perhaps we agree on one particular thing and we can work on that. And I try to use those relationships wherever I can to get things done for our country and for our Hawaii. Another series of tools that I use are the relationships that I have and back here in Hawaii, because obviously I have partners here in Hawaii in state government, county government, our nonprofits, our communities, and many, many other people here in Hawaii that I try to keep in regular touch with. I try to keep in regular touch with our governor, with our mayor here on Oahu, with the state legislators, the county council members, our union members, and many, many others to try to assure that we're on the same page in terms of how to go about helping both our country, but particularly our Hawaii. And then finally, I've already mentioned my great resource, which is my committed staff, almost all of whom are from Hawaii, who have an intimate knowledge of Hawaii, who are working here in DC, and in Honolulu every single day on behalf of Hawaii on all of those missions. I want to talk about the issues that are on my mind the most right now, the issues that I'm the most focused on, and then get into some issues that I know are already coming from your questions. The first and foremost and most obvious issue is the current government shutdown. We are facing the first shutdown of our federal government since 2018 and 2019. And that is a tragedy. It is disappointing. I've called it disgusting because it is so avoidable and it is so fixable. Um, what is a shutdown? A shutdown is a lapse of funding to our federal government, which causes the federal government not to be able to fund things, and therefore the services that are funded by those monies go unperformed. And that happens because every year we have to pass our federal funding bills, and we have to do it by September 30th, which is the end of our fiscal year, for the fiscal year that starts the next fiscal year. And this year, we did not, by September 30th, pass our appropriations bills, nor did we pass what we refer to as a continuing resolution, which basically just kicks the can down the road while we finish our job. And why didn't that happen? Why was it so hard? It is a fundamental disagreement in Washington, D.C., that this president and his partners in Congress have not extended some critical health benefits that are already in law that benefit tens of millions of Americans that are about to expire. And if they expire, their healthcare premiums, including tens of thousands of our own right here in Hawaii, people that need it the most, by the way, these are not people that can easily afford healthcare premiums. These federal benefits assist people that need help. Those healthcare benefits will expire. And they will either expire or they will see insurance premium increases double or more that they simply can't afford. And we don't believe that that's right. And we believe that we should continue those healthcare benefits now rather than kick it down the road. And so that's the nub of the disagreement. And it's a very, very fixable issue. We can very easily, inside of 1 or 2 days, come up with that solution. I've worked for the last days and weeks with my own fellow travelers in Congress, including people on the other side of the aisle, to put together a solution that will actually be mutually acceptable. It must be a bipartisan compromise bill. And the reason it has to be that is because although the president is in the White House and his party is in the majority in the House and the Senate, they have to get to 60 votes in the Senate by the rules of the Senate, and they don't have 60 votes. Otherwise, they just would have rammed this through, and tens of millions of health people without with minimal health care would be out of that health care assistance. But that has not been what's happened in the Senate. This is eminently fixable, and I hope that it is fixed very, very fast. But we have to deal with it while it is not being fixed. And so, what are the consequences of a shutdown? Well, the most immediate consequence is that the federal workers of our country, the people employed by the federal government, so civilian employees, as well as our armed services, are not paid because there is not the money to fund their payments. We have not authorized that. It is not passed yet. And so those workers fall into two categories. One is essential workers. They must stay on the job without pay. The second category of workers are furloughed. They're not essential, and so therefore they're not asked to come to work, and they're not paid. Here in Hawaii, we have somewhere in the range of 24,000 federal civilian workers, about 19,000 of whom work for our military. So it's a major part of our economy. We also have about 48,000 or so armed services members, plus all of their families, plus federal contractors who are dependent on these federal fundings and services in order for their own ability to carry their payrolls, their contracts. They are not paid either. So they have very difficult decisions to make. So the immediate consequence is 100,000 plus or so people that are basically today functioning without any income. And that's fundamentally wrong. That's fundamentally unfair. That is why we do not want shutdowns if we can all avoid them. Now, increasingly over time, you may not feel the effects of that as you sit here today, unless you're one of them, in which case you're sitting around the dinner table asking how you can make ends meet. But increasingly over time, what will happen is that federal services will start to drag. Non-essential federal services have already stopped, and so it will become more difficult, for example, to get any advice from the Small Business Administration on creating a small business. Certainly, problems with some of the basic federal assistance programs. Those will all start to see very significant lapses. We'll also see, even in essential services, disruptions because you may not be able to get the information that you need from the office, which is so stressed out by having to face a federal shutdown, even though technically they are at work. And so this is definitely not a good situation. It will increasingly hurt us all. And the best thing we can do is to come up with and agree to a very straightforward, very simple, bipartisan compromise, which will continue in some way, shape, or form critical healthcare benefits for tens of millions of Americans, as well as continuing the funding for our federal government. Now, I want to say something straight up right now, because nowadays in any great discussion and debate, there is just so much misinformation to try to cut through, and it's out there just put out there as if it were the truth, and yet it's not. And I want to say one thing here. Certainly, this administration and others have made statements that these benefits will go to illegal immigrants, people that are in our country illegally. That is categorically false. The benefits that we are talking about exist according to current law. They assist people with healthcare insurance premiums so that they can actually get healthcare. They are not benefits that go today to illegal immigrants, and there is no discussion of extending them to illegal immigrants. So let's get that off the table right away, and let's focus on the basic issue. Should they be extended or not? I think so. Should they be changed in some way, shape, or form? I'm open to that. What I'm not open is to leave them all behind. We look forward to trying to solve this as soon as possible. Second huge issue that I'm obviously dealing with all of this year is the net consequences of the second Trump administration. And of course, this administration, whether you agreed with his election or not, or whether you agree with his programs or not, this administration has been, at the bare minimum, confusing and chaotic throughout. Now, I've looked for opportunities where I can to work with this administration. Disaster assistance. I need to work with this administration to make sure that Maui continues to get assistance. I need to work with this administration to continue to try to look for opportunities for our country to maintain its relationships in the Indo-Pacific. There are many of my colleagues in Congress of the other party that I work with on a regular basis to try to find areas of common agreement where we can at least carve out practical problem-solving approaches that will actually try to get things done for the American people. But as this administration has waned on, frankly, the opportunities, the areas where I feel I can work constructively with this administration are becoming more difficult, and they're narrowing. It doesn't mean I'm not going to try to do it, but it does mean that I find just increasing fundamental disagreements in policy across a broader range of issues with this administration. For example, the administration's recent budget bill, I fundamentally disagreed that we should cut Medicaid. I fundamentally disagreed that we should reduce taxes to the upper income levels of our country. I fundamentally disagreed that we should add $4 trillion to our national debt. That was a fundamental policy disagreement. I disagree with this administration on its trade and tariff policy. I think it disrupts our relationships with, especially with our friends and allies around the world. I think it drives up costs for us here in our country, and I think it is not the right approach. I disagree with this administration's approach on foreign policy. So there's a range of policy areas that I don't agree with. But fundamentally, what I disagree with this administration the most is a far more deliberate and systematic erosion of the foundations of our government, attacks on things like free speech, attacks on the federal judiciary, actions in the federal government that I believe are illegal. We can disagree on policy, but I think we have to do so within the law. And these have added up to a fundamental threat on the rule of law. Now, I testified in front of the Hawaii State Senate Judiciary Committee last week on this exact subject, and I walked through as systematically as I could what the rule of law means and why this administration is a threat to it, and what we all need to do about it. That testimony is online on my website. I would encourage you to go take a look at it. But basically, this is, of course, incredibly on my mind because we can have policy disagreements, but if we're going to shred the foundations of our country, of our democracy along the way, then we are in some real danger. And I think we're in some real danger. And I think we all have to face that music. And so that's very much on my mind is how do I contest legitimate policy disagreements? How do I find ways to work with my colleagues, including across the aisle, to get things done, especially when they are ready to do so? Appropriations is a great example of that. And yet, how do I call out and oppose fundamental attacks on our foundations and on the rule of law? That is on my mind every single day. Let me talk about the cost of living, which is number one to all of us here in Hawaii. Now, I think that there's a lot of ways to approach the cost of living. The way I approach it is, look, we can sit here and talk cost of living all we want, but what we have to do is break that down and ask ourselves, okay, we have unreasonably, unacceptably high cost of living here in Hawaii, but why do we have that? And what do we do about it? Where is that cost of living high and why is it high? And what can we do to reduce it from a government perspective? So let's start with a very basic concept, which is that one of the reasons our cost of living is so high is because we bring almost everything we need in from the outside. We have to import virtually all of our goods. We have to import it almost all from the U.S. Continent. And that cost of living is driven by shipping costs. And so I asked myself, okay, what do we do about shipping costs? And that's where the Jones Act comes in, because the Jones Act creates an artificial monopoly that excludes international shipping from bringing those goods from the continent to us, enabling the people that benefit from the Jones Act, a 100-year-old outdated federal law, to basically operate as a monopoly and jack your shipping costs up. Now that's passed along to you in everything: food, lumber, bags, TVs, whatever you might. That's all coming in by ship. And so if we can reform the Jones Act and open up the shipping lanes, or at least regulate the costs that can be applied there, then we can directly impact the cost of living. And that's why that is an issue for me, because it directly relates to the cost of living, and it's a direct impact on the cost of living. Number two, of course, I go back to trades and tariffs, which is a major issue for our whole country. Now, I don't agree with trades and tariffs to start trade policy and tariffs under the Trump administration to start with, and I fundamentally don't agree with it because I don't believe that we should be punishing our own friends and allies for the trading relationship that we have with them. I believe it is absolutely foolish for us not to have a productive and open trade relationship with a country like Japan or Korea or Australia or the Philippines. These are friends and allies. We need each other for broader purposes. So for us to punish them from a trade perspective is absolutely short-term foolish. But also fundamentally, a tariff is a tax on a good coming into our country, and that tax is passed along to you, and that causes a higher cost. And so, if we're talking about the cost of living here in Hawaii, we have to import a lot of that from overseas and then import it on Jones Act stuff down from the mainland. Well, that's a cost driver we should go after. And so, I don't agree with the trade and tariff policy on those grounds either. Could also start talk from that perspective about supply chains. What exactly are we doing back on, especially on the continent, to make sure that our highways are open, that our railways are open, that goods can move very easily across the country as opposed to being constrained? How can we renovate U.S. manufacturing so that we have greater supply production and inventory buildup so that we don't have these shortages that got absolutely exacerbated during COVID? That's why we saw the COVID inflation go, because the supply chains got so gummed up. Cost of energy and utilities, that's one of our highest costs and going up rapidly. To me, the solution there is to continue our move towards renewable energy, because over the long run, that is going to reduce the cost of our energy. And so I completely disagree with this administration's movement away from incentivizing the development of renewable energy for that reason and for other reasons. The cost of food. One of the reasons I support local agriculture so much is because not only should we try to utilize our own incredibly productive Hawaii for our own food production, but because everywhere that we can do import substitution, in other words, produce stuff here for here, we're removing one of the costs, which is shipping it from the continent here. Supplemental nutrition is important from that perspective also. And then finally, the cost of housing, of course. We talked about supplies, which are very much driven by the Jones Act, and affordable housing. How can we incentivize affordable housing so that we have a much better range of housing across the various incomes? These are areas that the federal government has direct activities in, and I try to maintain those activities and fund them through appropriations at the federal level. I think, we can talk about the actual costs, but equally important is, how do we maintain an economy that produces good incomes to be able to afford, hopefully, lower costs? So you can't only do it on one side, you got to do it on the other side too. And here I focus very, very much on the drivers of our economy to help them at the federal level. Tourism and travel are going to continue to be a top part of our economy, and they should, and they need help at the national level. I participate through the Travel and Tourism Caucus on formulating both federal programs and appropriating for those programs to assist our travel and tourism industry across the country, including in Hawaii. Our construction industry is especially strong right now. In fact, that's the one that's really holding us up right now in a very uncertain economic time. There, my particular focus is on our military construction. I serve on the Appropriations Committee's subcommittee on defense, which is the subcommittee that has half of our federal budget, and so I'm directly responsible for our federal budget on the military side. I also work with the subcommittee that does military construction, where I served for 4 years as well. And we have been able to boost that military construction funding here in Hawaii to hundreds of millions of dollars a year. There are billions of dollars of federal construction monies in the pipeline to Hawaii right now as a result of your delegation's efforts in these areas over the last couple of years. And we need to make sure that we use that money wisely to make sure that people have good, solid jobs, to make sure that people can provide for their families and to boost up this part of our economy. Education, I try very hard to maintain our institutions of education, not just because that's an area where we must provide for the educational needs of our next generations, but because it's very, very critical to research and development dollars, as we just saw at the University of Hawaii with another record year in terms of external funding, including federal funding of research and development dollars, but also because education is its own economic driver, especially as we educate people from other places here in Hawaii. And they bring their money here, of course, to pay for their education, and that's good for us in the economy. So these are very specific areas where I think we need to work to build up a far more resilient local economy and to address very specific drivers of the cost of living. So let's not just talk about the cost of living as just kind of one big thing up there in the sky. No, it's broken down into a number of components. It's broken down into food, shelter, agriculture, services, medicine, where I definitely work to control the big pharma gouging, especially in prescription drugs. These are drivers, and we have to find out what those drivers are and go after each of those drivers. I've already talked a lot about appropriations. I spend a ton of time on appropriations. This is a bread and butter part of my job that goes on year to year, regardless of who the president is, regardless of who is in the congressional majority. I've built up quite a bit of experience and seniority on that committee overall, as well as the subcommittees that I serve on at this point, and I try to use that as well as I possibly can. And so, as I said earlier, I think a good half of my working year, in one way or the other, is related to appropriations, both working in the Appropriations Committee, which is a real grind to get it right every single year. We go through the same cycle every single year of 12 separate appropriations bills and preparing for appropriations. And then after that, trying to make sure that the money is properly spent. This has paid off in some incredible results for Hawaii. We have one of the highest results in the entire country. We punch way above our weight in terms of federal appropriations compared to any other state. A couple of very good examples. When you need it, you need it. Red Hill, where we have now funded over $2 billion for the remediation and the closure and the next, the closure of Red Hill and addressing health needs for those that were severely impacted. And then finally, of course, Maui, where we have seen $2 billion plus as well, and where we will see another billion plus at least in the coming years as we rebuild Maui. That all came out of appropriations, and that was all due to solid work by your delegation together with our partners, state and county government and the communities. Excuse me. The next area that I want to highlight is the Indo-Pacific and the Pacific Islands. The People's Republic of China remains our major challenge. This has been true for a while. Sometimes it comes and goes in terms of our public discussions. Sometimes it's not on the front page while we're in a shutdown, but it is there every single day. And every single day it's trying to change this world from a world that I believe has been a good world for our country and world into a different world that I don't believe is going to be good for our country and world. And the only real way to do that, two ways I should say to do that, is to maintain a partnership of nations across the world that have shared values and a shared commitment that the way we do it is the way we want to continue to do that, together with a very, very strong deterrence from our military. And that is critical. I spend a lot of my time trying to work in both areas, not just to support our military with what it needs to deter the People's Republic of China and its partners such as Russia and North Korea, but also to maintain the relationships that we have with partners and allies in the world, such as Japan, Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, the ASEAN countries, Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island countries themselves. This is our ohana. This is our yard. This is our family. This is our kuleana. This is our responsibility for our country and for our world to be able to advance our country's and our world's interest in the Indo-Pacific, the most consequential and I would say dangerous area in our country, in our world, currently and easily for the next decade plus. I spent a lot of time in this area in a lot of different ways. A couple of other areas that I try to focus on. Number one, the social safety net, the combination of understandings and programs that have been built up over decades to take care of those in particular legitimate need, not people that have other opportunities, but people that really through no fault of their own need extra help. That social safety net is frayed. We obviously know it's under attack. And we know that we have to try to preserve it. I speak, for example, of Medicaid, which is one reason why I opposed the budget bill so strongly was its attack on Medicaid, attack on the idea that we should, in fact, help people that need help with their health, including many here in our Hawaii, as well as just basic things that are left undone, such as family and medical leave, which many other countries in the world have. I'm a co-sponsor of the Family Act, which is to provide family and medical leave to assure that to people that need it when they need it. I think that's time is long overdue. And then finally, I would call out our natural world, our environment, our natural resources that are just under threat across the board, and not just from a natural consequence, but also just from an assault on the policies that we have built up over generations to try to advance protections of our natural environment. We see this across the board. We have significant attacks on our longstanding mining policy to open up our public lands to indiscriminate mining going on right now. We certainly have seen protected areas opened up to oil drilling that should never have been opened up. We face a significant threat right now in the efforts of some to commence deep sea mining before we even know what the consequences are going to be to our oceans. We have seen, of course, in this administration, an outright assault on decades of sound policy in advancing us towards alternative energy and recognizing the reality of climate change. Yeah, let me see that again. Climate change. Scientifically demonstrated alterations of our climate with significant natural results and caused by our own activities. That's what climate change is. That's a reality. And so this administration's decisions to deny climate change, pull us out of international understandings, have been particularly tragic. And I spend a lot of time in Congress trying to defend against these really assaults on, again, generations of a solid foundation to protect our environment. Many other issues out there. Those are just some of the things that keep me up at night. Case.house.gov for any issues in terms of anything that I'm doing at all, and mail us at ed.case@mail.house.gov. Questions again. I see a lot coming in, so I'm going to just start answering questions if I could. And apologies for the long introduction, but there was a lot that I wanted to pass along to you. I'm going to do this in speed format here, so I apologize if I don't, read the entirety of your question. What can we do to get the country back on track and support my work from that perspective? Look, I think the number one thing we collectively need to do is to have a discussion among ourselves. Now, I sit here, I represent 720,000 people. Many of you support the president. Um, you're loyalists. You support him without question. And yes, people also do the same with Democrats. They do the same. They did the same with President Biden, as an example. So this is nothing new to our political dynamic. But I think that regardless of what we believe the right policy direction is for our country, the biggest risk we face right now is losing a consensus as to what the proper rule of law is for our country. Losing a consensus that we have certain foundations for our country, and those foundations should not be eroded. For example, the foundations of the Constitution about the separation of powers, about the proper role of Congress, about the proper role of the federal judiciary. I don't think that anybody should be questioning the federal judiciary. That is the part of our government that actually is providing the only check and balance against this president right now, because we have no effective check and balance going on in the United States Congress, where unfortunately, and I think tragically, and I've talked to many of them about it, we do not have enough opposition by my Republican colleagues in Congress to the actions of the president. And since they're in the majority, you don't have Congress functioning as a check and balance. That's a very dangerous situation to be in. Two out of the three branches of government are basically not checking each other. The only one that is the federal court system. And I don't think that we should be talking with each other in a way that risks our federal court system, for example. So one of the things we can do is to try to have these very difficult conversations with each other. I think we have to do that. And we have to ask ourselves, is this enough? We saw the political violence of recent months, so horrific. Can we agree with each other, regardless of how we feel from a policy perspective, that that's unacceptable for any reason? It's unacceptable for any reason. No, we can't go to a point where we somehow start to accept that political violence is the answer to deep held policy disagreements. So if you're asking me what we can do, there's a couple of things we can do. Of course, we all have the power of the vote. Next year is a very important election, the midterms, where although the president is not up for, a vote, he is indirectly because Congress is at the midterm point. All of the U.S. House, 1/3 of the U.S. Senate. This is an opportunity for the people of this country to weigh in on whether they think the country is going in the right direction or not. So that's a critical part of getting involved. But I think more importantly, more urgently, we need to see if we can reassemble a consensus on what is fair game to disagree on and what is it very dangerous for us to disagree on from the perspective of breaking the foundations of our country. That's my biggest worry right now. Can we get the military to give the state a suitable landfill? We are, of course, in a very critical period with our U.S. military, in which the military is reassessing and renegotiating leases of state land for its own purposes, its own uses, what it needs for our national defense. I've been very, very involved in those discussions and trying to facilitate solid discussions and solid outcomes for years now. As a matter of fact, we've funded many of these efforts out of the appropriations committee. And the best I'll make 2 points on this. First of all, I believe that the military needs suitable, appropriate access to our lands for national defense. This is absolutely critical to our national defense. I think we should do it. I think we owe it to our country to provide it. But obviously, it needs to be on a fair basis as to the state of Hawaii. And it needs to be an arrangement that helps us to take care of our own concerns. And so basically, many things are on the table. as to what we really need, what the military can, as a practical matter, provide. And I have found the military very open to these discussions. They understand the importance of these of access to these training and other areas for national defense, and they also understand the importance of providing for our needs, of helping us with our own needs. And so I think, this is one of those areas where it's a productive discussion to have. If there are lands that the federal government owns that might be suitable for our landfill, then I see no reason why we couldn't try to work that one out. What are you doing about the misleading posts on government websites about the government shutdowns that violate the Hatch Act? This is very, very disturbing because this administration is doing a couple of things with this shutdown that are absolutely inappropriate. The first thing that it is doing is that, and it's announced this very publicly. It is manipulating the shutdown as an excuse to lay off federal workers, where it wouldn't be able to do so. At least it could not be claimed to be able to do so otherwise. In other words, it's using it as a pretext to do what it wants to do anyway, which is to outright fire federal workers. That would be arguably illegal. There's a process to go through when you reduce government workforces, a RIF process. This administration doesn't want to do that. They're saying that they're going to do that. I think that's inappropriate. They've also, by the way, talked about the reduction in benefits to Americans as a result of the shutdown. That's irresponsible because those benefits are provided by law, and those benefits are also provided from sources of funding that are not affected by this shutdown. For example, Social Security is not affected by normal yearly appropriations. So this is a spook tactic intended to intimidate, and it's not appropriate. The other thing that they're doing is that they are utilizing the federal administrative communications process for normal communications that any of us would get. Your Social Security benefits are, going up. You have to worry about this. You have to worry about that. Completely neutral communications to Americans and politicizing them to, in so many words, argue their case coming out of the federal executive branch. That's totally inappropriate. It probably violates the Hatch Act, which in so many words says that you can't use the federal government for political purposes. The federal executive branch, the normal operations of the federal executive branch. I mean, if you're a political appointee, yeah, you can talk about some of that stuff, but not if you're just kind of running the government on a day-to-day basis. So this is inappropriate. I am positive that as we speak, lawsuits are being prepared to make that case. It's wrong. Let's see. There's a couple of questions here about Israel and Gaza that I'm going to kind of put together a little bit. I'm happy to answer any of the specifics that you've asked me, but I think what I'd like to do is just take the big picture. We're of course coming up on the anniversary again of the tragic attack on Israel that precipitated these years of absolutely tragic warfare for Israel, horrific conditions for the hostages, of course, and of course for the people of Gaza who've suffered incredibly throughout. I have taken many positions now urging Israel, urging the administrations to provide for humanitarian access for supplies to the people of Gaza. I've taken many positions with my colleagues that try to make sure that Israel complies with international standards for humanitarian treatment in the middle of a horrific war. I have also said consistently for these years that unless until Hamas is destroyed, that we will have no possibility for peace in Gaza, and that Israel has every right to try to destroy Hamas. And that has been a very difficult process on both fronts. I believe that the recent proposals by President Trump, the so-called 20-point plan, and I would encourage anybody that hasn't read it to read it, is a realistic, plausible plan to end this war. It has some really key ingredients in it. The first is that the war ceases and that the hostages are returned. The second is that Israel commits to withdrawal from Gaza over time. The third is that Hamas lays down its arms and disarms permanently. The fourth is that security guarantees are provided to Israel by Arab countries that Hamas will not be allowed ever again to have any kind of a foothold. Now that's a package that I think could work after a long and frustrating series of stops and starts in terms of ceasefires and negotiations. And as you know, that package is pending approval by Hamas right now. And I sure hope that Hamas takes it, because I think the option is more of what we have today. Now, I've been asked by some of my constituents to cease any further support for military assistance by the United States to Israel, any military assistance. And of course, we do help Israel with its national defense, subject to its obligations to use it in compliance with international humanitarian law, which I agree is the case. And frankly, I do not believe that the answer to achieving peace in Israel, Gaza, generally in the Middle East, specifically over on a broader level, is for the United States to cease our military assistance to Israel. So I have respectfully disagreed on that. I agree on the fundamental principle that the people of Gaza must have access to humanitarian assistance, that this war must be brought to an end as soon as possible. And I hope that that happens very, very soon, because otherwise, I think that we're going to see more of the same, as I said. How long do I think the shutdown is going to last? I have no idea. Like I said, we have the outlines of a deal that exists today. That is something that, again, I've worked on, not just me, but many people, and it's not rocket science. There are very straightforward ways of addressing the healthcare needs of tens of millions of Americans. There is no reason not to do it. It's an existing law. It needs to be extended. It should be extended. And there's no reason not to extend it. And frankly, there's a lot of complete distrust that if it's not extended now, it's not going to be extended. And so if we can solve for that, we can get this done in short order. What do you expect the Trump administration to do regarding furloughs versus threatened terminations for a reduction in force? I spoke to this earlier. It's one thing to have a shutdown in which you have essential workers that stay on the job without pay, and or furloughed workers who technically stay on the job, but they're not working and they're not getting paid. That's quote unquote a normal shutdown. What's different on this one is the Trump administration, through the Office of Management and Budget, seizing the opportunity to state that if the shutdown goes on, it's going to actually fire federal workers. And again, I think that's unnecessary, inappropriate, likely illegal, and it certainly doesn't help the resolution of the situation at all. Now, again, I mean, if there's a policy argument by the administration to reduce the size of the federal government, those opportunities are available. But I consider this to be nothing more than an attempt at intimidation, an attempt at creating and sowing fear throughout the federal government. And it's not necessary. It's cruel, really, is what it is at the end of the day. And so I think that they will pursue this. I strongly believe that this is mostly just negotiating on their point. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to change. It certainly doesn't change the dynamic of healthcare that is needed for tens of millions of Americans, including tens of thousands of our own right here in Hawaii. And so I'm not. I think the next couple of days are gonna start to tell us quite a story on which way this is going to go. What will be the most immediate impacts of the government shutdown on Hawaii? I spoke to that as well. The most immediate impacts are the 100,000 plus of our own ohana here who are working or without pay right now, wondering what their next paycheck is, and or our family members or contractors or employees of contractors who have some great dislocation in their own lives. But make no mistake, if the shutdown drags on at all, we'll start to see more immediate impacts in terms of the inavailability of federal services across a range of federal activities, some of which we just take for granted every single day. Let's see. Why allow non-citizens or foreigners to purchase and own our land? It's a very good question. One that we've been debating extensively in Congress, especially as we have seen far more systematic efforts by the People's Republic of China and other adversaries to buy directly or through back channels land around or close to very sensitive military bases, for example. Now, we already have a mechanism in our country that deals with this. So it's not like anybody can just walk in and buy any land anywhere. There is a mechanism called CFIUS, which is a national organization that basically controls, or at least watches foreign investment into the United States for exactly these purposes. But that mechanism, frankly, I don't believe is strong enough. It needs to be updated, and that's the discussion we're having. Now, we've been pretty open in our country in allowing foreigners to own land in our country, which is not the same as other parts of the world where there's a far more strict limitation on that. And I think we can have a good, solid policy debate about whether we actually should allow so much continued foreign investment. But on the basic point of whether adversaries should be able to manipulate our own openness in terms of allowing for foreign ownership of land in our country, I absolutely agree that that's absolutely ripe for a far deeper analysis and for a revision of our laws, which in fact we've been doing for a number of years now. And I'm actually on bills, measures, or proposed legislation to do exactly that. We can update you if you'd like to email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov. Okay, let's see. Recently, the president stated he had taken $16 trillion due to tariffs. Will you push to find out where this money is? So I'd have to look into that a little bit. I think what you're referring to is the president is very fond of citing the revenue from the tariffs that he has implemented to date, and that revenue money comes back into the federal treasury and is used for various purposes. It's revenue as is your income tax, and it comes in. And so the president's argument for trade and tariffs has a lot of elements to it, but one of them is he's treating this as a revenue tool for the federal government. And I would say to you a couple of things as to that argument. First of all, the federal government is in such incredibly bad financial uh, status that even if you jacked up tariff revenue by a factor of 10, you wouldn't come anywhere close to a real contribution to the financial challenges that our country faces. And certainly you would not have anywhere close to the impact that the president's um, law to basically reduce the tax rates for the most wealthy among us in this country, which jammed this country to the tune of $4 to $5 trillion of further deficits and debt, was a far greater consequence from a fiscal perspective than anything you could ever do on tariffs. The second thing I would say to you is, okay, so if you're measuring this only by the revenue income, and you're not also looking at the other side of the equation, which is, okay, what is the consequence to economic activity in our country because you jacked up tariffs, because you charged an extra tax on those goods coming into the country, you jacked up the tax on those goods coming into the country. That was a tax that had to be borne by the businesses, passed down by the importers to the distributors and the wholesalers, and finally they got to the corner drugstore, and then they were passed along to the consumers. But you haven't accounted for that in your economic analysis. You haven't accounted for the negative effect of that. You haven't accounted for the fact that those businesses are having a much harder time surviving out there because you did that. You haven't accounted for the fact that you've lost federal income tax revenues because those businesses are having a much tougher time. So you can't just look on this and you haven't accounted for the consequences over the long run of absolutely messing up relationships with friends and allies out there, which has a consequence in terms of our national defense. Since we share our national defense with other countries, we're the only ones out there doing some of this stuff. That's a far different approach than if we've got a partner in Japan or the Philippines or Australia. And so, just to claim that, hey, I'm having a great time with my tariffs because I'm bringing in some tariff income and contributing it to the national treasury, that's like the first 3% of the analysis. Is the rail funding at risk? I don't believe so. That funding has been committed. We're down to the end of the actual committed rail funding from the federal government of about $1.55 billion, which was, a long time ago, 10 years ago now. And I think the figure is we're down to about 300 million left. The rest of it has been distributed to us. We're actually expecting to get that last amount from the federal government. So far, so good. That's taken a lot of work by your city and county of Honolulu in conjunction with the congressional delegation, something we've been working on since 2019 when I got back to Congress. So been following it every single year, trying to make sure that money is released. Mayor Blangiardi did some real yeoman work in terms of satisfying the federal government that rail was on a solid footing, and that the federal government should therefore release more of that money, which it was holding back for a couple of years. So we're in very close contact with both the FTA in Washington D.C. as well as the mayor and the county and the rail folks. Now there's no expectation, just to be clear, that there's going to be more federal money here. That's it from the federal money, and at that point, the decisions as to financing rail are going to have to be decisions that are made by the state and the county going forward. So plans to expand, any cost overruns, those have to be handled locally. But as to the money that was already obligated, so far so good. Let's see. How can you justify this year's increase of an additional 200 billion in Department of War spending? And can you defend this egregious misuse of tax dollars? Um, uh, Department of Defense spending was not increased by $200 billion this year. In fact, in our appropriations committee, again, I serve on the subcommittee on defense, so this is directly in my kuleana. We did not increase Department of Defense regular appropriations. Now, what you might be thinking about is I think they may have gone up like 1% or something like that, but not 200. The annual amount is $850 billion or so, which is a lot of money, but it's not over $1 trillion. So it's not 200 billion. Now, what you might be thinking about is that when we passed the budget bill, the so-called reconciliation bill, which I voted against, again because it reduced taxes for the upper income, slashed Medicaid, drove $4 to $5 trillion of additional debt. One of the things that it did, that bill, was to increase defense spending by 150 billion over 5 years, I believe it was. And I didn't agree with that. That was one of the reasons I voted against it. So the bottom line is I don't justify that, and I don't think it's necessary. There have been some increases in defense spending, though, but that was through that bill that I opposed. Let's see. How can I get a refund of my CSRS offset pension? You can email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov and tell me exactly what your issue is, and we will try to help you with that. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but this is a clear example of the third category of my mission, which is to help you with your individual concerns. And so I'm very, very happy to do that. And so please do that. Do you support illegal immigration? No, I categorically did not support illegal immigration. That's again, I think that's related to the misinformation being put out there right now in terms of the government shutdown. That is absolutely false. In fact, there are some very prominent fact check independent organizations that have disproved the statements that are being floated out there that you may well have picked up on. So I can send those to you so that you can check it yourself. If you will email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov. Would the U.S. Congress consider a bill such as the Commercial Financial Disclosure Law, which requires MCA providers to disclose APR, total repayment fees, and reconciliation rights, protecting small businesses from predatory practices? I'm pretty sure that we do have legislation that does actually propose this. First of all, I feel very strongly about the underlying purpose of what you're describing, which is to protect small businesses from predatory practices. There are just a plethora of predatory lending institutions, fly-by-nights, some of them very, very sophisticated, that can trick you into alleged legal obligations very fast, very, very fast, that sneak up on you like a ton of bricks in the night. And we need laws to require the disclosures and to make those practices illegal, and to require disclosures of questionable practices that will add up fees and costs without you actually knowing about it. So if you would email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov with this question so that I can get you into our system, we can give you a better answer on that. But in general, the answer to your question is yes. Um, will you continue to vote against Trump's tax cuts on tips and federal taxes so that we can pay more federal taxes we all support? That was a part of the budget bill that I voted against for many, many different reasons. I don't, and so I don't see why I would. I'm not going to change my vote on that stuff. I've already voted. And I don't know when it's going to come up again. But the answer is likely yes. But like any tax bill, you got to read the details. Um, as a federal employee, we are required to complete formal training on the Hatch Act. Why is HUD violating this action so blatantly with explicit political positions, and what is being done to hold them accountable? I've spoken about this twice already. It is inexcusable and likely illegal, in my view, that this Trump administration is manipulating the normal process of communication between the federal government and the folks that rely on the federal government for normal benefits and services to argue a political point. Now, they are very cute about what they're doing, to be honest, and direct about it. They, for example, understand that it's one thing to blame the shutdown on obstruction in Congress, and it's another thing to get into the details and to urge that therefore you should vote these people out of office. They at least get that much, but they are skirting that line so close, absolutely violating the spirit of the law for sure. And I believe the letter as well. And I believe, again, that they are going to be sued and they should be sued. They are nonetheless doing it because they're flaunting the law. Back to the rule of law, back to the foundations of our democracy. The law says you're not supposed to use those communications for overt political purposes. You can describe what the policy is, but you can't get into the political, the politics of it. That's what the Hatch Act is supposed to be about. So um, they're doing it because that's the way they operate. I don't have a better answer for you than that. And that has to change at some point. And that change is either through the courts or because my colleagues in Congress get a spine and start to apply a legitimate check and balance to this administration, or because the people of the country get somebody in Congress that actually will do that. Is part of the shutdown why Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva has not been sworn in yet? Can you please comment on this, as she needs to be sworn in? So, Raul Grijalva was one of my really good friends in Congress, a longstanding colleague from Arizona, served with him on natural resources where he was chair, and he died tragically earlier this year. His daughter, Adelita, was just elected in a special election to replace him. And my Republican colleagues in the House don't want to call the House back into a session other than for 1 or 2 minutes, as is required, because they don't want to swear her in, even though she's legitimately been elected. There's no question about whether the election was, valid or not. It's totally valid. And they don't want to do that because there is what we call a discharge petition. A discharge petition is a very, very unique and special petition, which is designed to make sure that measures don't get bottled up in committee if a majority of the members of the House want it to come out of committee and come to the floor of the House for immediate consideration. It's a safeguard on abuse of committee power and also an abuse of leadership power by holding it up. And so that's called a discharge petition. And we have a pending discharge petition, which would force an immediate House vote on a resolution that would mandate that the Department of Justice's files on Jeffrey Epstein be opened up. for everybody to see. So no more concealing, no more chasing it through subpoenas, no more obstructing. Just show everybody what's there. Answer the questions once and for all. What did this absolute, uh, inexcusable figure do? Who did he do it with? Who's hiding, if anybody? What did the Justice Department do or not do? These things are critical, not just because we want to know the answers, but because we need to know where the accountability is. I mean, thus far, one person apparently is accountable, the person that actually killed himself. Nobody else has really faced accountability other than Maxwell. You're going to tell me that all of that happened and nobody else was a part of it? That just doesn't resonate with your basic American. Now, it's pretty obvious that our Republican leadership and probably the president don't want that discharge petition to get to the number of signatures necessary for us to have an immediate vote. And we're one vote away from that right now. And so if Ms. Grijalva is sworn in, she will immediately sign that discharge petition, which will immediately be effective. And so the answer to your question is, that's why they are not calling the House back into session. And that's why they didn't have, they canceled, that's probably one of the reasons why they canceled the House votes earlier this week. And I'm supposed to go back to Washington this weekend for votes next week. I wonder whether they're going to cancel them again. But that's your answer for now. Please, could you share your position on the DEA's formal rulemaking process following the Department of Health and Human Services recommendation to move marijuana to Schedule 3 from Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act? Well, first of all, I've always supported the descheduling of marijuana off of Schedule 1. I believe that's too harsh. It centralizes the policy of how we deal with marijuana in our country much too much in the federal government. So basically getting it off Schedule 1, I support. Now, I don't know enough of the specifics of the rulemaking process. If you want more information, we can do that for you if you email me at case.house.gov. That's my basic position on it. What help will you provide federal workers in Hawaii who are laid off through a potential reduction of force? Well, first of all, the first and foremost objective here is to try to deter this administration from manipulating the federal shutdown as an excuse for conducting a full-on reduction in force against the federal workers of our country in general, and presumably that would reach into Hawaii. Although I will say that because so many of our federal workers in Hawaii are related to the U.S. military, which is far more than many places throughout the rest of the country. Like we've got 19,000 out of 24,000 federal workers that are associated with the military, which are, I would believe, a little bit more insulated from rifts simply because they're doing military work, which is essential work for our country, as opposed to, some other parts of our country where we have federal workforces that do hardly any military work. But none of them should be rift. It should not occur in this way. And so, first of all, we need to get this shutdown resolved as soon as possible. Second of all, we certainly need my colleagues in Congress to provide an effective check and balance on any such reductions in force. And then third, we need to support the lawsuits against it. Now, many of your, and I don't know whether you in particular are a federal union member, but many of our federal workers here are unionized federal workers. I've spoken with your union leaders. I've communicated with all of them about what's going on and why and how we can help. But their nationals are engaged in lawsuits already. Large lawsuit brought a couple of days ago to do exactly what you're talking about, which is to argue the point that this would be an illegal act by this administration. I'm wondering why the Democrats aren't being vocal about the release of the Epstein files. We're being very vocal about the release of the Epstein files. We're being very vocal about a federal government shutdown right now that is irresponsible, that should never have happened, and that is threatening to take away the legitimate existing healthcare benefits of tens of millions of Americans. So if we're not focusing, specifically on Epstein right now, it's because the focus needs to be on the shutdown. But I don't think you should assume that somehow that's off our radar, nor off the radar of the American people either. And clearly, this administration and my colleagues on the Republican side in Congress sure wish that we didn't talk about it. But again, they're trying to avoid it coming back as an issue. Is President Trump going to use National Guard and armed forces to take over Democratic-run cities? Is there a legal case against Trump with declaring tariffs? Can he declare a state of emergency on his own? Well, he's certainly trying to intimidate Democrat, and it's not me talking. This is not a political statement. This is Trump saying, I'm targeting Democratic cities. I'm going to go in and, try to take over Washington, D.C., try to take over Portland, Oregon, try to take over others. I mean, these are Democratic cities. He's said what he's doing. One thing about Mr. Trump is he's pretty transparent what he's doing. We just have a hard time believing him sometimes because it's just like, really? But the bottom line is, I don't know if take over is the right word, but he's certainly trying to assert federal power where he can inside those cities, especially in law enforcement, even though, again, in many cases, it's most likely contrary to law that he can go into a city without the actual leadership of that city or state inviting him to do so. This is a subject of lawsuits in the court system right now. I don't believe that he has that right. It's related to your question about can he declare a state of emergency? What is a state of emergency? When does it exist? Do you have a state of emergency if your local leaders don't think that they are in a state of emergency? Is there a legal case with Trump for declaring tariffs? Yes, there's a huge legal case right now pending in the United States Supreme Court that asks the question, can Trump actually unilaterally change trade and tariff policy since it's supposed to be the domain of Congress? Under our Constitution, Congress regulates commerce. Congress sets trade policy. Congress sets tariffs. And that's the basic question before the Supreme Court. And I believe the answer is Congress should be doing it. Unfortunately, my colleagues in the majority are letting him go right now. Okay, let's see. I'm just going to start to try to wind this up because I've only got 7 minutes left. And so I'm trying to do the ones that I haven't really addressed. What support am I giving to the federal workers and military members that are working without pay? I'm trying to end this shutdown as soon as possible. That's the major support I can give you. The other support that I can give you is if you have any individual questions, any individual concerns, anything that you need help with to get yourself through. If you've got a question about a student loan repayment that you're not able to get an answer to, if you've got a question about any number of areas that if you weren't in this situation, maybe you wouldn't be asking the question. We want to help, and we want to try to help you with those questions. So I think the best support I can give you is to answer those questions and to help you navigate your own situation. If you email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov. The other thing, by the way, to note here is that after the last federal government shutdown, 2018, 2019, there were some claims by the then Trump administration, at least for a while, that questioned whether pay that was not paid during the shutdown to people that were working without pay or furloughed without pay, whether that should be reimbursed to them after the shutdown. And that was, of course, an outrageous claim to make. Of course, that reimbursement should occur. So we passed a law, 2019, I think it was, collectively. And basically, the law says, in no uncertain terms, that you get your back pay. And people did get their back pay then. We haven't had anything since. And so that law is on the books. And one of the main things I can do is to make sure that it never comes up as an issue that anybody claims that somehow that back pay is not due. And so that's very, very much on my mind. Let's see, will military retirement pay be affected by the government shutdown? It should not be affected. But if you have any problems with your military retirement, let us know right away. The only way that it might be retired is if somehow the staffing in those military retirement pay offices starts to be affected itself by the shutdown so that people can't get answers. We need to know that stuff right away. Let's see, what's happening with a lot of these questions are on individual questions that we can help as a matter of an individual case. And so if I didn't answer your question, the main thing I want to say to you is please email me the question and we'll try to get you an answer. What's happening with student loan discharges, especially disability discharges? I don't know the answer to that, but we would like to get you the answer to that. What is preventing Trump from not working to reopen government and instead running it without constraints? Well, I mean, fundamentally, I suppose what's preventing Trump from not reopening government is that he needs some basic government funding to run government himself. And so it's pretty hard to manipulate government if you don't have any money, and there's no legal authority. Government is working off of reserves right now, and essentially those reserves start to run out in a matter of weeks. And so it's not a situation that continue just indefinitely. There is no money authorized to government right now, and so even for the Trump administration, that would present some limits as to how long they could actually drag out a shutdown. What actions are being taken regarding the recent cuts to VA benefits for veteran supplemental therapies such as acupuncture, chiropractic care, where allowances have been reduced from 60 visits per year to just 20? We have done a lot of work on this issue with you and your group that I think you're probably working with, and I can update you if you email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov. Is it true that illegal immigrants also would benefit with the ACA extensions being requested by the Democrats? For a third time, absolutely incorrect. Absolutely incorrect. With that, my time has come to an end in terms of my talk story here, my questions. I still have about 10 or 15 questions that I didn't get to. I'm sorry about that. Hope it was valuable to take a little bit of time to outline what was going on at the beginning. Happy to answer your questions if you email me at edcase.house.gov. Otherwise, I really appreciate so many people on the line watching throughout to get an update. Appreciate your opportunity, my opportunity to listen to your comments, to try to answer your questions. And again, the best way to know what's going on in my office is case.house.gov. I really ask you to check that out. A lot of the answers to your questions are there. We hope to hear from you at ed.case@mail.house.gov. Otherwise, let's wish us all the very best as we go through continued very difficult times. Best wishes to all of you, and aloha.